Hello and welcome back to this episode. We are going to check out the first estate, the clergy. So we are going to look at what does it mean that we have values here and the clergy, that we have buttons here, and what does it all mean for our provinces basically. Now to start with, every province we have in our realm here, for example, let's take Calabria, has a tooltip here down here with estates or elites, which shows you what is present in this province and which estates govern it, basically. As we can see here, the power of the nobility is 81%, the clergy is 45%. Which means that the power share here in this province is relatively split between these two. And you can also see the loyalties in this province. For example, the clergy is going down currently by 0.26. And also you can see the wealth in this province. So for example, if your clergy is relatively powerful, they will also be very rich. But the richness of this clergy, or their wealth, can be influenced by you as your state by interacting with it. So for example, currently, this church in our realm has certain liberties. For example, it has a church authority, it's sovereign. So the church is completely independent of the state. Basically a state in the state. It also doesn't pay anything. It has no obligation to the state, and it also has its own finance system by extracting wealth from the peasantry and your resident population in your cities. These things can be reformed over time if you want to. For example, by the button on the top here, you can see the next reform we could transform into. So for example, we could go from a sovereign church into a subordinate church, which means that we are subjugating the church to the power of the state, which they of course will hate. And so they will become furious through this, which might lead into a civil war if you are not careful. And will lead to a weaker clergy overall. So, but they will get more power from wealth because they are basically buying their way into power afterwards. So they are no longer independent, but they play a role otherwise in your realm. The same goes for example, obligations. You can start to move them into a regular taxpayer, basically. So you can start removing the church support or getting the church support. You can also start making them take less money from the peasantry by reforming their church finance or forcing them this way. You can also interact with them in these kind of buttons here. What you can see, for example, is the power here. You can see what the power value overall is, where it comes from, the loyalties, the wealth. But you can also see here the shareholding of farmlands, forestries, and so on, but also of the urban values. And you see here that the academic is 90% because the education of your realm is completely in the hands of the church at start. Which is basically an industry here in your province. This is the industry tab. And you can see here a religious education, which is in the hands of the church fully. Therefore, they own a lot of your education currently. What you can also see here is basically the incomes from them. Where do they use their money? What do they get from their stuff? Therefore, you can maybe see an angle how you can weaken them. Or you can make them poorer, or you can strengthen them if you want to. What you can also do now is, for example, you can support them or you can leverage them. Supporting means that you get loyalty from them. They are currently 68%. By, for example, promoting the faction, but you could also donate to them, empower them so that they get more power in general, political power. But you can also do something like a show of devotion here, which will give you 10% loyalty by sacrificing some prestige and power points, by just telling them basically, yeah, we are your faithful servant. But there are other interactions you can do here, basically. You can do the opposite by leveraging them. You can crack down on them, so reducing their influence. You can expropriate them, therefore take their land and properties. You can secularize in general, therefore weakening the power of the church. You can leverage them for other benefits like unrest reductions, but you could also, for example, prepare for a religious war, which gives you a CB And you could also just rally the faithful, basically, which depends on the strength of the church in your realm. So in this case, we get 20% recovery speed, manpower recovery speed, because the church is relatively powerful. But we can also leverage them for some legitimacy by telling them that they should support our realm, which costs us loyalty with the clergy, basically. So we trade loyalty for buffs, or we give loyalty them for debuffs, basically. So you can interact with these. And usually before you want to reform the church, you want to increase their loyalty here. But always keep in mind that reforming will cost you stability and will put your realm into jeopardy for a while. What you also can do here is direct the clergy to do things you want them to do, which is in this case keeping care of the religions in your realm. We can see here that we are 96% Catholic. We could now, we can't do missionaries and we can't do an inquisition because neither of them are strong enough to warrant, for example, for an inquisition or getting converted. We can't also do the Beacon of Catholic Faith yet because the Counter-Reformation has not spawned yet, which is something later on. But for example, we could... this also doesn't work yet. If one of your religions is strong enough, you could convert to one of them. For example, if the Orthodox population gets more stronger here, we could convert to them. And therefore switch our religion here. There are also some church aspects which are partially implemented yet. But basically, you can start reforming your church as well. For example, you can condemn indulgences, which will happen as events over time, which will cost you. But you could also authorize usury here, for example, or simony, which will, basically lead to less events from the church, lead to maybe less, where is it? Here, reform desire. If this one reaches 100%, the Reformation will eventually start. So it will tick up over time by events that every country that is Catholic is doing. Basically, if you allow simony and you have simony events, this will drive up reform desire because your population will be unhappy with these kinds of things. And yeah, you can also see your religious properties here. For example, we are, of course, very, very tolerant of our true faith here. And you can check these out for your specific realms, which might be slightly different depending on where you are. And that's basically the clergy, which will be mostly useful for converting your realm, so providing you with missionaries and doing certain jobs here like education in your early empire building. And later on, you maybe want to get rid of them or weaken them because you will get corruption from them. So we can see our corruption value here. The clergy currently provides 6% corruption towards our 48%. Of course, that's a lot less than the nobility, but it's still 6%, and you maybe want to get rid of it. That's something you can only do by reforming them and weakening their power, which you can do by leveraging them, but also by reforming them into a taxpayer and making them subordinate and furthermore. If you want to check out the maximum reforms you can get here, let's pick a song first. You can check out the rights and reforms here, over here in the state interactions, where you get a list of all the reforms visible in this screen. And for example, you can check out here the church authority, church finance, and church obligation laws, or reforms. And for example, we want to check out the church authority laws. So you can read all the information that is provided about these reforms here. We are currently on sovereign, that's why it's highlighted here. And for example, we maybe want to head for secular long term, which will provide us with the effects down here. So basically, we go from an empowered clergy to a weaker clergy, which however gets more power from wealth. So you basically want to not only reform the authority laws, but you also want to reform the way they generate wealth, which is basically, for example, the finance system of them. So currently they are on tithe here, and they are not on taxation, de facto taxation, so they are not taxing our peasantry, but we maybe want to push them to donations so that they are purely based on donation income. And we maybe want to reform them into an obligated estate so that they have to pay the state. Currently they exempted, minus 100% tax from clergy, and we want to get them to taxpayers. Therefore we don't have a debuff on taxation anymore, and they have to pay for whatever they do in our realm. Because one thing is certain, at some point you have to pay taxes for something. And with that, we come to the end of the first estate, and we're going to continue with the second estate, which is the nobility. So see you in the next episode, leave a like, and let's head over there.